Okay, so I'd like to call to order the February 9th meeting of the Board of School Commissioners. And note that all commissioners are in attendance with the exception of Pensac and Seward. Okay, and so we could take a moment for those that wish to join in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of
America and to the republic
for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, so first up then would be a motion for approval of the agenda as presented.
So move.
Thank you, Hurley. And Kevin's got his hand up for a second. Okay. And any discussion regarding the agenda? No? Okay. All those in favor of approving the agenda as presented? And any opposed? Seeing none, the motion passes. Okay, so on our regular, first item is the consent agenda. We have only two items, the minutes from the previous meeting and personnel memo 618. So I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So move.
And thank you, Hurley. A second? Kevin with a second. Okay, and any discussion? You know, it's consent agenda. All right, all those in favor? And any opposed? Okay, so the motion passes unanimously for our consent agenda. I see Commissioner Pensac is now on at, I have 6:34. So just to reflect that in the minutes. And so our next item on the agenda is communications. And we are not in receipt of anyone wishing to address the board. So we will move on to our school program updates. And first up, we have this student representatives report, and I saw Hannah and Isabella on here. So I will turn it over to you for an update. Thank you for joining us.
At RAS, we are celebrating kindness this week as part of our PBIS theme. This week, we are celebrating our school spirit with an activity each day. Today was Twin Day, and tomorrow is Dress Like Your Favorite Book Character Day. We have a reading challenge for all our students taking place this month, and culminating on Dr. Seuss's birthday. We are also excited at RAS to be partnering with Vermont Food Bank to be able to offer non-perishable food items for our families on a bi-monthly basis. Northwest and Northeast students are spreading some love throughout the city of Rutland this week as they go to 18 different locations, different downtown businesses with handmade Valentines for their storefronts. Thanks so much to our volunteer coordinators in each building for organizing this event. At Northwest, students worked hard to earn a silly hat and hair day, combined with a sledding party as part of their school-wide PBIS celebration. Northeast students have been learning about winter animals, cooperation, hibernation, and snow. Both schools plan on celebrating all of their hard work and learning during a winter carnival this week. That's all for my report.
Thank you, Hannah. Isabella?
So for the middle school, RMF's Youth Council has begun with 8 dedicated students who will work with councils across Vermont to motivate and identify grant proposals for innovative school projects. This is spearheaded by Mary Gilman and sponsored by the Vermont Youth Project. A teacher team has formed to develop modifications to the benchmark assessments and some of their Tier 1 and Tier 2 practices. These supports will be integrated during FlexBlock. February Fun will take place this Thursday and Friday with indoor and outdoor activities for in-person and remote students. The school is attempting a winter carnival, which will follow COVID guidelines. One activity that will be included is tug of war, 1 against 1. For Rutland High School, Rutland students were able to attend the first virtual state speech championships. Abid Alawi placed first for impromptu, John Cotter placed second in extemporaneous, and Ben Honsinger placed second in radio division. Congratulations to those students and the advisors of speech and debate. For student safety, 3 sports teams have been instructed to quarantine because of a positive COVID case. Anyone that has been in close contact has been notified and will follow COVID guidelines. Thank you to the administration for working fast to protect our student body. Congratulations to Hannah Solomano and Joe Anderson for being selected for the 2021 School Athlete Award. Congratulations to John Cotter, Giovanni Falco, and Alicia Caputo for being selected as presidential scholars. And congratulations to Brady Geisler for being one of 18 students selected for All Eastern Jazz Ensemble. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you both for your outreach to the other buildings to keep us up to date. So the next thing on our agenda is the school improvement plans. And I believe Rob Bliss is going to take the lead on this.
Yeah.
So I will turn it over to Rob.
Thank you so much. I want to thank you for the time to present about our schools and the district's great work this year. And I'm going to be sharing my screen. Just so the board members know, I have time for Q&A at the end of my little presentation. And so I'm happy to take any questions that you can present through Allison at the end. So, all right. So you should be able to see my screen in this little presentation about our school improvement plans. And, you know, when we start talking about our improvement this year, you can't possibly start any conversation about school improvement without coming up with the fantastic community effort that we've had in the middle of a pandemic. I want to emphasize a few things just to lay the foundation for the work we've been doing this year. First, I want to remind people that back in March, on about 48 hours notice, we went to a complete remote instructional setup with a one-to-one technology distribution in support of our community, with help from VTEL offering us additional access points for families that didn't have access. The caring and focused attention on our mission to meet the needs of the community was supported by all our employees from top to bottom. The community support from our local partners made everything possible. The Rutland Rec, the Boys and Girls Club, and Wonder Feet showed us why Rutland City is a community that supports each other and cares. They modeled that for everybody. As we went through that, months of planning led to a smooth opening in school at the end of August. And we had an in-person model of instruction that would support the Rutland City community and the local economy, without our ability to go face-to-face every day for all students who wanted it, K-8 and 9, and then a hybrid model at the high school, our community would have come to a stop on an ongoing basis. So also we had the ongoing care and communication of all things related to wellness and COVID safety. And I know a lot of parents are tired of getting phone calls when we say, here's the update, but our goal is to make sure everybody knows what's going on. So that entire community effort was a big part of all the work we've done for the community this year. Every student, every day for us this year meant that we're instructing all students in a format that meets their needs and their families' needs. The Remote Learning Academy, hybrid models, and full face-to-face in person. And for the face-to-face students, I can tell you that the impact has been fantastic. I sat with Lauren Pepp at Northwest last week, and she showed me the reading data for one school classroom where every student made significant gains. Most of them as much as a full year or more gains in 5 months of time in school. The instruction and learning has been great, but I must admit that it hasn't been without challenges. For some of our students who are working remotely, it's a challenge to get engaged and stay engaged. Our families are doing wonderful work and the best they can, But we do have some students who are not engaging as much as we would like them to. And in the state of Vermont, the term we're using for catching those kids up again is called recovery. And it's down at the bottom of the slide in red. Now, we started that work at the beginning of January. The state is going to offer some guidance in March. For us, that's too late. We have to get moving right now to support our kids in re-engaging in their academics and, more importantly, in their social and emotional well-being. In the middle of a pandemic, the culture of isolation that we've had has changed the way that students and adults interact with each other. We've been 12 months walking into the pandemic world. It'll take us time to walk back out. So here's what we've been doing. We've been assessing every single student on where their standing is academically and socially and emotionally. Once we have all that in one place and we take a look at it, we'll create a structure for how we're going to address the needs of the students and re-engage them. It'll take time, but this is our goal. We'll implement that structure and plan, we'll study it, and we'll repeat it. And this isn't something that we accomplish in the next 3 months. This will take 12 to 18 months for us to complete and stay up to date with all these recovery efforts. The efforts, people might wonder, how are you going to support that financially? The state is going to be issuing, thanks to the feds, a new round of ESSER grants, specifically targeted at recovery, as well as we've set aside a chunk of our consolidated federal program grants, the title funds, to support our short-term efforts here and get us rolling. We see this as some of the most important work we're going to do in the next 12 to 18 months. And I want our community to know we're well aware that we have children in need and that we are working right now to meet those needs. So that brings me to our goals, our continuous improvement goals. And as you can see in the district, we had 3 big picture goals. The first one's related to reestablishing an articulated K-12 curriculum that's fully aligned. The second goal is related to Rutland Middle School and establishing teacher advisories and good transitions. And then the third goal is working toward evolving and becoming a trauma-informed community in our school district. Just as an update, the Agency of Education paused their requirements for continuous improvement and action planning. We're actually ahead of the game. Last March, they paused everything and said, don't worry about it. We had already done ours and you had already approved them as a board. And we really appreciate that. So all they ask us to do, literally, here's the quote, provide updated information and implementation efforts where you can. And we're going to do that. The other thing we'll be doing this spring is a data-based needs assessment that will align and allow us to apply our title funds specifically to where targeted needs are. So our first goal is this K-12 curriculum alignment. Just like a lot of things, as the pandemic hit, we paused this work. Our structure will be, we have a core team of coaches, administrators, and content specialists to create the structure that we're going to use so that we can have a common framework of what our proficiencies look like, K through 12. We can assure common proficiency levels across grade levels, a common experience for students as they travel through our schools and transition from one grade to the next. We'll establish our project, our benchmarking progress so that we know where our kids are, and that'll help us target professional development. That core team is forming and organizing as we speak. I spoke to 2 of our content specialists and coaches today. Our second goal on the middle school is focused specifically on the middle school and advisories. I want you to know that the middle school is currently working with a Tarrant Institute from University of Vermont, as well as the Middle Grades Institute. And it's a really productive relationship. Our teacher advisories at the middle school are in place. They happen every day from 8:33 to 9:03. Each teacher has 8 to 10 students who they'll stay with for 2 years in their advisory to establish a good relationship. Our advisors reach out to families on issues of attendance, social emotional wellness, and academics. And every Tuesday, the advisors check in with each student on those same things, on how they're doing. Our counselors at the middle school build daily slides for each advisory to use. And it's like a daily lesson plan so that everybody has a common foundation of experience in their advisory. The result of this is 86% of the teachers say they have a real close connection with their advisory students. We'd like that to be 100%. We're getting there. 93% of the students report feeling supported by their advisory teacher. That's a real plus. You have these slides, and if you wanted to, you could click on that link at some point. It'll take you to one of the lessons that they do in advisory, one of those slides. Connected to that are smooth transitions into and out of the middle school, grades 6, 7, 8, and 9. This is the transition season. I know that last week, the middle school and intermediate school already met about how they're going to work to transition students in from 6th grade to 7th grade. So it's not just a big change going from one building to another, that they establish relationships early. And then, as always, the high school and the middle school work closely together to make sure kids are connecting. Now, I want to emphasize, just like I said about recovery, we want to make sure students who are entering the high school are prepared to do that. And so those conversations at parent-teacher conferences in March will be about, are our students ready for the high school or are they not? And if they're not, how are they going to get ready? What are we offering to get them, and how much engagement do we need to have them prepared to be at RHS? Our trauma intelligent work, it's easy for me to establish the need. In 2013, 16% of the students, or 16% of the births at Rutland Regional, were opiate exposed. Over 70% of the incoming kindergarten students' families report at least 2 adverse childhood experiences for their kids. And then the disconnection as a result of the pandemic. These 3 things alone, and there are many more data points, say, like, we need to have a trauma-informed network. So our actions, we circle up. And all that means is that in everything we do, we look to see how we're supporting each other, our students, and our families. The advisories I just spoke about, as well as the morning meetings at the elementary schools, are part of that. Professional development in trauma intelligent care and trauma informed understanding. In fact, last Friday, Pam Reed had all the paraprofessionals in PD, and this was one of the options they could take up. Ongoing efforts on restorative practices in schools. Tier 1 means that our teachers have to be the ones that are the first line to understand and support kids who need trauma-informed care. If we simply say, we're just going to refer everybody, we'll overwhelm our systems immediately. All the equity efforts we're working on are really targeted at understanding and supporting every student, and that's part of trauma-informed care. We're very fortunate that we have 2 fellows in the school district. One's working with the Yale University Center for Education Improvement. That's Pam Reed, and she is focused specifically on trauma-informed schools. And Stacy Shortle, one of our psychologists, is a Rutland Fellow this year, and her entire effort is about supporting a trauma-informed school network. And we as a district and a community benefit from that special learning and connection that those 2 have. Now, I would be remiss in my duties if I didn't take the opportunity to say, hey, don't forget to vote on March 2nd. And on January 26th, Henry Heck, our city clerk, put a great little letter to the editor in where he outlined the different ways you can vote. He said the polling stations will be open as always. You can also call or write to the city clerk's office and request an absentee ballot. And you can also walk into the clerk's office when they're open and vote right there. There are so many ways to vote. I looked at the data from November, and 74% of the registered voters in Rutland voted. I'm hoping we'll do as well this time around. We always want a big turnout because it's part of being a good citizen. And then we get a good message. So all that, just to hit back home again, our 3 big areas of focus for the district are the K12 curriculum, the middle school's transition and advisories, developing good relationships, and then finally our trauma-informed care. And I want the community to know we're watching, we're listening, and we're supporting our students who are in need and who are prospering. So with that, and that really fast presentation, on my part, I wonder if there's any questions from the board. And if not, I would have our next team step up. And if there is, I would answer a couple.
Dina?
Just a question. I just heard some reporting somewhere, I don't even remember where, about the current truancy level that I think Vermont as a state is seeing because of some of the exclusive remote programs. So it's more regarding the kids that are on remote only type of thing. I just wanted to see if we have any clear understanding of where we're standing with that, or maybe not so much data, but like how many, or do we have kids in that situation? But if, let's say we do, how do we come out of this kind of missing in action type of situation?
So it's a great question. And just this week, I think it was this week or the end of last week, I had a great conversation with Steve Sampson on this topic. What I asked for K through 12 in the fall, we had a concern from our principals that we may have had students who had never engaged. And so I wanted the names of those students. And so in each case, in each school, I was presented with the names of students who hadn't engaged at all, as well as those students who were struggling to engage. And we started working together. Each school has a team of people and a method that they chase after students are having a hard time. I wish I could tell you we are successful in every case, but we're not. We still have some students we're worried about. I would say based on the number of, I also get data on the number of truancy affidavits that are filed. And I would say we have a few more than we have in the past. I wouldn't say it was an overwhelming increase. But the truancy affidavit doesn't tell the story of the kids who are partially engaged, which is the real worry. So we have a number of students who will sign on, let's say they're K-6, and they'll work on their literacy and their math, and they'll do a little bit of each. So they were present, but because they're not face-to-face, and maybe because their families aren't able to support as well as they'd like, they're not getting as much accomplished as they would. On the topic of truancy, I'll also tell you I'm in close connection with Karen Reynolds at the State's Attorney's Office. And we had an early conversation with Rose Kennedy back in, I want to say June, about how we were going to define and address truancy. So I guess the short answer is we have a little bit more truancy than we have in the past, but the real story is the kids who are partially engaged are the ones that we're more worried about. There's more of those.
Anne?
Hi, thanks. Rob, are there any resources available for the current seniors right now if the ESSER grants aren't coming until for the next 12 to 18 months?
You mean for like credit recovery?
Yeah.
Absolutely. So we set aside a certain amount of our money from our current federal grant for credit recovery. And I just communicated with Bianca McKean at Rutland High School last week about what projection she thought we would need in terms of credit recovery for the remainder of the school year. Just like the rest of the folks, the rest of the schools, the team at the high school is assessing where kids are and who's going to need extra support to make sure they can graduate. Of course, students have to carry a lot of that responsibility. However, we have a lot of safety nets for them. So short answer is absolutely. We're supporting every grade level, including our seniors. And at the high school, credit recovery is the big move.
Great. Thank you, Rob. Kathy?
In regards to the second goal, you talked about the Tarrant Institute, and I just wonder, how are they supporting your goals? How are we working with them?
Yeah, so they have regular contact face-to-face with our faculty at Rutland Middle School. So I think I have a copy of the schedule. I can't pull it up right now, but so we were presented with the schedule for the exact number of hours and when our consultant, Rachel Mark, was going to be present and working with the folks at Rutland Middle School. Because of the pandemic, it's largely in this format, this Zoom format. But I would say 3 to 4 times a month for an hour to 2 hours each time, she's present and working with those people in teams. As an example, yesterday, I know that she was present for the entire middle school faculty meeting and working with them on these types of goals. How are they structuring everything they're trying to do? So she works with the whole group and she works with small teams as well.
Okay. Any other questions for Rob before we move on to the pre-K and intermediate school? No?
All right.
Okay, looks good. You still leading the way there, Rob?
I am. I'm going to share my screen again, but I'm going to turn it over. We have here for our K-6, we have Suzanne Engels, Carrie Corse, and Lauren Pep. I'm going to turn my camera off so you can't see me, but I am going to share my screen so you can see their work. Go ahead, folks.
Okay, I'm starting. Hi, everybody. I'm Suzanne Engels, and I'm the principal at Northeast School. And I am starting off our group presentation by reviewing the basics of our K-6 plans. We each have our own individual school plans, but they're so similar that we were able to put them together on a handy one-page chart here. So we're going to go over some of the basics of that and just touch on briefly the challenges that are unique this year. And then Carrie and Lauren will talk a little bit in more detail about how we're doing and our direction for the future. So if you see on the chart, the 3 schools outlined have very consistent goals, and those goals are in 2 main areas. And these goals are very consistent with the district-wide goals other than the middle school goal. So we each first have a goal around literacy for K2, and then grades 3 through 6 has a goal that involves both literacy and numeracy. And then we each have a second goal that involves social, emotional, behavioral areas, where we are aiming to, our goal is to expand or deepen our work that we're doing in those areas through programs and initiatives such as positive behavior interventions, trauma-informed school, or restorative justice. So then, as far as looking at those goals and measuring how our efforts are towards meeting those goals, we use several different data points to help us. Academic goals are measured with common local assessments and benchmarks and standardized tests such as the SBAC. And then to look at how we're doing around our social emotional goals, we look at things like climate surveys, school climate, PBIS surveys published by, or that are put out through Agency of Ed, PBIS groups. We look at number of behavioral referrals that the schools have, attendance, and we also look at academic scores, since we know that when we have improved climate in a building and improved social and emotional skills, we also have improved learning. So that's how we're looking at our progress. So this is pretty simple and straightforward, basic goals, but you know that everything about this past year hasn't been real straightforward, but we're still plugging away. At the K-6 level, we acknowledge that with our local and state COVID numbers, the benefits of in-person learning outweighs the risks of in-person learning. So from the summer planning, we've been charged and we've aimed and are providing full-time learning for any of our K-6 students 5 days a week. There's a number of districts that are not doing that, but we're doing that, and we're doing that with I'd say 75 to 90% of our total K-6 population taking us up on that offer and being in person full time. But at the same time, we acknowledge that some individual students and some family needs result in the fact that remote schooling really is the better choice for them because of their unique needs or situations. So in addition to the full-time in-person model, we've also been providing multiple options, each having different routines for the kids, different groupings, different schedules. And it's not just one or two models of operation that we are running, but we in reality have to have 5 models, fully in person, hybrid, which is a mix, some days in person and some not in person, fully remote. But then we also have needed to develop those models for a long term, but also models that are for short term, for when we've had to make a short term, everybody, or small groups go remote for specific quarantines, or even for our new inclement weather days. That's a short term remote model. So we really are operating with those 5 different sets of operations and procedures and schedules and staffing. It's been complex, to say the least, and we've had to be very flexible with those models, because we've had to shift from one model to another, sometimes with a moment's notice, and sometime, depending on the situation, even overnight. So we've been doing that and doing it well. And then other factors impacting our plan and our progress on the plan, other than logistical planning that we've had to do and the flexibility, we've also spent a significant amount of time and good energy helping families to really understand what's going on and what we're doing, understanding our expectations for them, helping them make educational or health decisions. And that's been really important. And we've done that communication, stressing the importance of many of the factors as clearly as we can, but also while keeping those firm limits, we've had to do so with a lot of understanding and compassion, because it's been really difficult for families with some suddenly changing situations, or difficult to make a decision about what is best for my child. So to help to understand the nature of the decisions and how we've had to communicate with our families through those decisions, I'm going to suggest that you think about for yourselves the first time your own child or a child that you love was getting ready for their first day of school ever, the first time you ever put a child into school, and or school or daycare, and think about all the questions that you had and all the worries about how's it going to be. And now in this context, try to imagine that same situation, but imagine doing this for your first child for the first time without ever seeing the inside of the school building, or without ever meeting face to face those caregivers. And then take that and try to imagine the importance of our communication and the time for communication in the middle of a pandemic. So that's been a huge, something I'm very proud of with all of the staff, is the amount of compassion and understanding and time that we give to our families to help them through this. And we've been doing that. We've had that ongoing 70 and growing percentage to 90% of families opting for in person. So we've been doing it, and we've been doing that well. So that's been a big part of our past months since March and ongoing. And once we did accomplish that reopening of schools and safety, we have begun to move forward in earnest with catching kids up with academics and with social skills. So we're moving forward with that and really diving into our plans now. So when we have plans, we typically ask ourselves these questions as educators and leaders. We look at, what do we want our kids to learn, and what's the best way to help them learn? How do we know how they're doing? What can we do when they're not learning, or where they're not at the place we want them to be? And then what more can we do? Thank you. We're done with that chart. And then what can we do more when they are where we want them to be? And so that's a sort of a typical framework for how we continue to plan and carry on our improvement plans. This year, we've had to really answer those questions pretty differently than in previous years. Now we're not only changing many of our safety routines, but this year we happen to coincided with starting a whole new math curriculum, K through 6, and a new writing program, K through 2. And this was something we initiated pre-pandemic, but we're doing it. We're doing it. The new math programming has worked out quite well because it's got a heavy online computer-based component. So that's been helpful in a lot of ways. And regarding the writing program, that's been a program where at first there was a lot of reservation of thinking, oh, can we really be doing this? Should we be doing this with all the extra things? But it's been beautiful, and the teachers are loving it and have been really pleased with this units of writing instruction. And what's really neat about it is it encourages us, even in the primary levels, even starting beginning of kindergarten, to talk to our kindergartners like they're writers. They are writers. And so the whole idea is, just like if we have a 12-month-old little toddler that's kind of scooching around and walking, sometimes we don't tell that 12-month-old that, you really can't walk yet. We don't say that to them. Right? Well, we don't say that to our kindergartners either. So we're starting our kindergartners off day one saying, you are writers and you are readers. Might look a little different. It's a little scoochy at time, but they are writers and readers, and they've stepped up to it. No pun intended. They're doing great. So that's been a wonderful little surprise for us. We didn't think we could do it, but we've been doing it. It's going to be really amazing to see the effect of these programs after years of the grades doing these programs year after year. So that's a little bit on some of what we're doing. As far as how we're measuring progress, our assessment has been very much impacted this year because there hasn't been consistent instructional models. What happens in hybrid versus fully remote versus fully in person versus in one home versus around inclement weather versus ongoing, it's very different. So there hasn't been consistent instructional models, and we haven't been able to assess kids really to make conclusions about differences in scores, because we can't really rule out whether those differences are more assessment issues, because like assessing remotely is really different. We can't tell if some of those differences in scores are learning issues where a child has a certain delay that we really got to help them to catch up on, or it may just be some lack of instructional issues where somebody kind of just looks like they're engaged, but they're just kind of skating on the surface of meetings, popping in and popping out and not really there. So our assessment of our plans is a little bit different this year. We don't have as much hard data as we really would like. We've also had to assess our assessment calendars, and our progress reports are looking very different from previous years. And I believe there's still some question about large school standardized testing. I might be wrong, but I haven't heard any definite decisions on that. So we are having to rely less on standardized scores and more on just descriptive statements of this is what our kids are doing. This is what it looks like. These are the benchmarks they can do, as opposed to looking at progress by comparing to a standardized score or a norm group. So that's a little bit on what we're doing, how we're measuring or loosely measuring progress, or measuring progress as good as we can. And now it's enough for me. Now Carrie and Lauren are going to talk a little bit about more about how we're doing and where we're going.
Thank you, Suzanne. Thank you. I'm Lauren Pepp, principal at Northwest, and I thought I'd just give you a few snapshots of things that are happening in our school to kind of share with you a little bit about what Suzanne was discussing, but just to give you a picture in your mind of what that looks like. But let me start by saying that despite all odds, our teachers, support staff, and our parents have made this school year a happy and a productive one for our children. One of the greatest worries we had over the summer, I had parent after parent calling me to say, my child can't come to school because my child won't wear a mask. And, you know, teachers were worried about that. Parents were worried about that. Well, let me tell you, the children proved us all wrong. They have been amazing. They wear those masks all day long without complaint most of the time. And we look forward to the day when we'll see their beautiful smiles again. But they're doing a super job. So last spring, as you know, we needed to pivot quickly in order to move from in-person learning to remote learning and back again. So our teachers and our counselors worked diligently all summer long, also early last spring and then into the fall, to learn how to execute various online practices. So with teacher leaders in the district leading the way and with lots of support from our IT department, we adopted an online platform that engages our young children in learning and allows for two-way communication online, even for children who do not yet know how to read and write. And that was huge. It also allowed us to stay connected to our families. And then we had a team of teachers commit to some professional development last summer that provided our teachers with some inspiration, new ideas, techniques, and strategies to support student learning, especially in this world of remote teaching and learning. And as I walk through classrooms, I see these teaching skills and others we've learned over the years being employed, and I absolutely love it. You would be amazed to hear this buzz of learning. Let me share an example. So last week, I stopped in one kindergarten classroom after another, and I saw that same beautiful sight. There were pockets of children working independently, either working with words or silent reading with their little self-selected book bags, or working on writing, or others working in a small group with their teachers. This is a framework that allows our teachers to conduct small group targeted lessons during literacy blocks, and it promotes student independence, choice, and high levels of engagement, all of which instill confidence and a love of literacy. I really wish you could all come on a tour with me because you'd be so proud of what you saw. So maybe when this pandemic is over, we can arrange for that. And then our remote learning academy proved to be a really important option at Northwest. It was about 1/8 of our students. And thanks to the remote learning academy teachers and our families, most of our children in the remote learning academy are doing well. And for the 175 children who are in person, they're really happy to be with us physically every day with their hardworking and highly dedicated teachers and their friends. And they say so. So here's what one second grader wrote when he had to write an opinion paper. And it was an opinion paper about, do you want to be in person or remote? And he wrote, I think it is better to be in person for school. When you're in person, you can be with your friends and your teacher. You can play outside at recess and eat lunch with your class. It's more fun to be in person. I love school. Our school staff agrees. We're so happy to be in person with our K-2 students. Not the same doing it with them virtually. One of our goals in both primary schools focused upon building our toolbox of trauma-informed strategies, like Suzanne was talking about. With the stress and anxiety faced by everyone during the pandemic, we're grateful for all of the strategies that we've learned. We're also grateful for the more robust continuum of services that we now offer to our students in Rutland City. And that includes a revamped planning room for our students. So that provides a space for children when they need to regulate their bodies if they're feeling kind of out of sorts. And we have a multi-age classroom in each building for children who have a need for an alternative environment. We also have the new program at Peerpoint, the Peerpoint Personalized Learning Center, otherwise known as PPLC. Jess Henderson and the great staff at PPLC have created personalized programs and an environment that's responsive to individual student needs. So I want to tell you another story. One child was absent for a little bit of time recently due to illness. She's 7 years old. She recorded a self-initiated, unsolicited video and sent it to her counselor and her teachers. And this is what she says. Makes me cry every time I hear it. I've really missed you all. I've had a stuffy nose, but I hope it goes away because I really want to see all of you. Every one of you PPLC people are my favorite friends. And I really think this school has made me a better person. That says it all. We're clearly doing a better job of giving our children what they need when out of the mouth of a child we hear, this school has made me a better person. So for all of the support we've received from this school board, our hardworking families throughout the pandemic, and our entire supportive Rutland community. On behalf of our young learners and all of us teaching them, we thank you. Please be on the lookout for Valentine's and Rutland downtown businesses from our second graders as they spread a little love in this community that they love so much. Thank you, everybody. Carrie, you're muted.
I think I haven't heard that before. So I'm Carrie Course, principal at the intermediate school, and I want to thank Lauren and Suzanne for setting the stage. I've had many people say to me, wow, what a year to take over as principal, but honestly, I could not think of a more supportive environment that I could be in. Rutland Intermediate School has pulled together to not only continue to learn new ways to present instruction and assess students and bring some continuity to our grade levels, but also to support our students and families. This year has been one certainly of increased stress for families, actually for everyone. You wouldn't know if you could come into our building. Our students are happy. They, like Lauren just said, they want to be here. You honestly can see their smiles under those masks. They willingly follow our new procedures. They are even having a voice in how we can do things differently. They've embraced our PBIS themes, monthly themes. This month, Hannah mentioned, we are highlighting kindness and equity. Our PBIS team has been working really hard to ensure that our activities and our rewards include all of our students. So we want to make sure that our remote students are feeling connected and that we're following the guidelines that have been set. Our PTO even had to shift their fundraising efforts to accommodate our virtual world. Actually, this Friday, I'm looking forward to picking up some chocolates. But if we think back to this summer, when we had to, think about meeting the guidelines that were set for physical distance in our classrooms, we found that we needed to have fewer students in our rooms than we had originally planned in order to maintain that distance. So late in the summer, we had actually 6 teachers. They were interventionists at the time, and they switched their roles, and that allowed for us to have additional classrooms. Almost all of our teachers switched to self-contained, with the exception of some of our 6th grades. And we started the year with 5 full-time remote teachers. There were ideas, lessons, materials, time, even space. We had to create, 6 more rooms. Everything was shared among everyone. Teachers are able to provide targeted instruction and intervention right in their classrooms for both literacy and math. And as mentioned earlier, programs like Zern and Lexia have helped to be able to differentiate the individual levels for students. As you can appreciate, they're at very different levels due to different circumstances, whether it's a pandemic or just ability. So that has helped. I heard attendance mentioned. Whether students are in person or remote, we monitor attendance the same way. We want to ensure that our students are engaging. At the start of we're trimesters here at the intermediate school. So at the start of our 2nd trimester, we sent yet another family survey out, and we had enough students that were choosing to return or to start in-person learning that we were also able to switch a teacher back to in-person learning. So currently we have 4 full-time remote teachers. Our trimester is just about ending, so we've sent another survey, and we will be adjusting classrooms again based on the results of that final learning preference survey. Let's see, one One practice that I am particularly proud of is starting each day with our community block. And this kind of ties into our second goal at the intermediate school, where we really want to ensure that everyone is staying connected, especially our remote students. We hear from them a lot that they still want to be a part of the school as much as possible. So in order to kind of respect that and respect the staggered times that students are arriving, we initiated a daily morning video announcement. It's actually been quite the hit. Students are eager to either be recorded or submit videos for the announcements. It's just been a very positive way to keep everyone connected. Classes actually are with the help of our technology instructor, or the newly learned skills from many of our teachers. Classes have been able to creatively make informative videos to share. They've done news reports, public service announcements about wearing your mask, and certainly showing classroom work. As we're not in the halls and in different areas, it's a way to be able to showcase what's been done. Maybe even telling a joke or two, which has proven to be quite funny. So let's see, every day, every student kind of starts the same way, whether you're remote or in person. We're starting with that community block, going in the morning. Students are watching the announcements, and then they're spending about 30 minutes focused only on building relationships and making connections. Students also are eating their lunch in their classrooms every day with their teachers, and that's just another opportunity for students to connect, again, also with their teacher, working on a little table manners while they're at it, which is never a bad idea. All of that contributes to the decrease we've seen in the use of our restorative room. And I say restorative room because we've moved away from the idea of a planning room. Has a little negative connotation. So we really focus on restorative practices. And, of course, there are still issues, but when they arise, we work on using a restorative circle, having conversations with and between parents, as well as making sure that families are informed, as soon as possible. So I can confidently say that the need for out-of-room intervention has decreased. We've seen a significant decrease in that. Hannah, I'm going to put a plug in here. Hannah also mentioned our food pantry, and we are very excited to be partnering with the Vermont Food Bank to open a food pantry here at RIS, where the research says that over 30% of Vermonters are experiencing food insecurities. So I'm just so pleased to be able to offer this resource to our families, and as beneficial as being able to provide non-perishable foods for families, we are looking forward to expanding this and strengthening our partnerships in the future, and being able to maybe host some events related to the food that's available. So, overall, we certainly are looking forward to a post-COVID school year where we can see one another's little faces and the expressions, but honestly, we have also fully embraced the opportunities that this year has afforded us. So thank you for your time, and I'm pretty sure any one of us would answer any questions that you have.
Okay, great. Thank you. To our team of K-6 principals, we appreciate all the work you guys are doing. So any board members have any questions? Dina? And then I have Aaron.
Just a curiosity question, something that I caught from Lauren's presentation. Can you tell us a bit more about the inter-age classroom? How is it different from? Did I catch that right?
Yeah, a
multi-age.
Yes. So we have a multi-age classroom in the building. Children still have their gen ed classroom, but they also we have some children who have access to a different space that is we call it a multi-age classroom, and that's like an alternative program if they have needs and they just need time outside of the gen ed classroom.
So they kind of go back in and out if they need to?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And there's a special educator in that space.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Dina.
Great. And Erin?
I just wanted to say thank you to all of you for really bringing us into your world and providing visuals and some real I felt like, we were there, and I appreciate all you do for the families, and it's apparent you all do too. And thank you for your work.
Thank you.
Okay. Kathy?
This is also just a curiosity question for Carrie Course and the food pantry. Are you taking donations for that? Is that?
We're not set up to take donations. We actually got our first full delivery today from the food bank. So it's like a little soft opening right now. We'll see what we can do.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Any other questions for the admin team? Okay. Thank you very much for joining us and giving us your perspective and all the hard work.
Thank you.
Okay. So next up on our agenda is the superintendent's report. So I will turn it over to Superintendent Bill Olson.
Thank you, Allison. And I think we're running a little bit behind, so I'm going to shorten mine down just a bit so we can catch up. And let's see, I did want to congratulate Tom Brady. I'll move on. But seriously, I'd like to just give the board an update in the community, an update on some of the COVID cases that we've been running into lately. And so, like the rest of the county, we've been working through cases, kind of a steady number over the past number of weeks. And they usually are related to either students or staff or family members or close contacts of students or staff. So I know this board has heard from our communications. We go through a process where we work with our school staff in the building, and with our COVID coordinator, Justine Franco, the school nurses, and with the Vermont Department of Health to get the guidance that we need to work through a case. And we basically are doing the contact tracing process and determining who must quarantine. So when we do that, we try to be pretty conservative about who we're identifying as close contacts, meaning when I say conservative, I mean that we are on the side of caution, that we will look to make sure we're quarantining anybody who might fit that profile. And that's been a benefit for us because we've been able to basically eliminate school spread. We haven't seen in-school spread because of this, because we've been able to move people out of those settings if we suspect that there might be some kind of an issue. So where we have seen cases pop up is when some of our community members are not as vigilant as they should be in out of school settings. And like, I give you an example, like you might share a ride with a colleague, or you might, have some friends over if you're a kid into the household. And that's where some of that spread has been happening. So it's really not in the buildings, but outside the buildings. And that's becoming a challenge for us right now. So we're just asking everyone, we need people to stay vigilant for the next few months. I think inside our buildings, those are probably the safest spaces because we have to follow the guidance of the Department of Health, and we have to follow all the protocols. It's not maybe as strict on the outside world, and we need folks to stay vigilant so that we can keep the buildings open for as long as we can. I think we're going to have still a few more weeks of tough sledding, and if we'd like to be able to get through into April, and when the weather turns better, hopefully some of this will calm down a little bit. So we're just asking for everyone's help. So this is where I'm going to shorten things down. I wanted to mention, I saw in the Rutland Herald today that the story about Encore Theater and the production that they're putting on, it's going to be on PEG TV on channel 1095. I wanted to credit those kids, and it's just like all the other comments that were made by Hannah and Isabel and Rob and Suzanne, Lauren and Carrie. The folks are working incredibly hard to create a normal school situation in the middle of a pandemic. And it's when you listen to everything that the people who preceded me said, things are going really well. We are having, I think, one of the most successful years I've ever seen in all my years in the district, despite all these challenges. So Encore Theater, they're facing a pandemic. They can't really perform the way they normally would do, and so they kind of pivoted and were innovative, and now they have a show that's going to be on next week on PEG TV. So I want to congratulate them. I really want to congratulate the entire staff for being able to be flexible and be able to innovate and be able to really commit to what we really have. I think one of the highest time in the building percentages of all the districts in the state. That's been the commitment we've tried to work towards from the very beginning of this. Because we feel like we owe it to the kids, and we owe it to the community, and we owe it to the economy of Rutland. So we want to keep that going, and we need help in doing that. I'll say that our families and our students have been fantastic as well. People have been very, very flexible. You know, we've had a certain couple of situations where we got heard of a case at 8:30 at night. Had to close down a grade or close down a building so we could do contact tracing, and people have been really good about living with that for a time so we could work through it. So we thank the community as well. I'll tell you that very briefly that Ted Plemenis has been touring around the county. You know, he's been presenting at some of the Rotary clubs that are in the county and talking about the school budget. And if anybody in the community wants to talk to Ted about how the school financing works in Vermont and how it works specifically in Rutland, he's willing to take any phone calls and spend some time having a conversation. Or if any groups out there would like to hear about how our school budget is looking and how the budget in Vermont school finance really benefits the schools and the citizens of Rutland, Ted's available. But we have an information meeting on March 1st, the day before the election, and that will be on a Zoom format. That'll be the link will be on our website if you'd like to come to that, and we'll go through the budget that night as well. Very, very quickly, some legislative updates. The governor's inaugural address, he is laid out some of his plans for education. One of the plans I think is interesting and would be beneficial to all of us is they're talking about how can we leverage some of this distance learning that we've gotten pretty good at to help kids in the future who might really benefit from that. And this could be a wide variety of kids who could take courses from afar, courses from courses that we might not offer in our buildings, or for kids who might say that actually working from home is a lot better for me than in a crowded building or for whatever reason. So we're going to work through that as Rob talked about with our recovery plan and trying to consider how we can use distance learning to help make more options for students. Something that was pretty significant I saw in a legislative report was on January 19th, the General Assembly's economist is predicting a new forecast for the state education fund that they're anticipating that because of unanticipated tax revenue, that the ed fund is not going to be in a deficit by the end of the year. So that sounds very positive for the state. I wanted to pass that on to folks. Rob mentioned the ESSER 2 funds that are out there we're going to be using for recovery, and those are the kind of things we'd be using for things like he mentioned credit recovery and tutoring. We're going to talk about the weighting study in a few minutes, so I'll leave that off my list. And last, I just want to thank, I think Rob had mentioned that Pam Reed and Patricia Eigner had developed a professional development opportunity for all the paraeducators and any other staff who were interested last Friday. They gave a wide variety of different opportunities for learning. And I wanted to thank them for developing that. It was Pam and Patricia and a number of other district leaders put some classes together for folks. I wanted to congratulate the 5 students who graduated from Rutland High School. That was in January 22nd from the Grove Street program. Congrats to those kids. They're on their way. And I wanted to alert the board, again, despite the pandemic, we still are working through our Vermont Global Issues Network Conference that we're going to hold one more time remotely due to the pandemic, but this will be the 8th year in a row that we've held this program. It's run by students, and we have middle school students participating, high school students are running it. It's a great event for folks to learn about some of the issues that are facing the local community in the world. And this year's focus is referencing sustainable consumption and production, one of the UN sustainability goals. So that should be an interesting topic. And the date for the GIN conference is April 1st. So that's it for me, Allison. Thanks.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. And then as far as the budget information session, I believe the link will be available, if it isn't already, on our website for those that want to register to catch up with Ted and some of the board members on the 1st prior to Election Day. So thank you. Next on our agenda is the committee reports. So first up, I have staff relations. So I will turn it over to Dina, the chair.
So, what day of the week is it? That's where we start usually. That's how we start our meeting. Where are we and what day is it? We are moving along in all fronts. We, I think, are making good progress in just getting some information across from both sides. It's a lot of work for everybody involved, especially for, and I just want to say it out there for everyone. I never understood the amount of work that it takes to produce this. And anyone that has been on negotiation before, I salute you. And it is really an amazing team effort. And I'm not just saying it to smooch people around. It's not part of my cultural understanding of smooching, but it is a true team effort, and we've had so much work to do in terms of gathering information. And I just wanted to thank Bill and Ted and Rob and Aaron and Joanne for putting all the work that in terms of finding information, putting charts together. Aaron has all the records from the olden days, and bringing it into our historical context. So it's been a lot, and it's still ongoing, and we're doing a lot of almost like investigative journalism, a little bit of gathering information. So not much in terms of sharing any specifics, but we have meetings every week with different units, sometimes 2 units a week, and we are moving things along. Hopefully we'll have some outcomes soon, but not yet.
Okay, great. Thank you, Dina. So then the next committee is the building committee. So I will turn it over to Erin, the chair of that committee.
Hi. So we have a new building and grounds director. I'd like to welcome Glenn Scott, and Michael will be with us for a little bit longer in the transition. So that is sort of the piece of update for the building committee, and the biggest piece there is. And then we've dealt with some, winter items as far as buildings and so forth, which have been taken care of directly with little impact on students and teachers. So I'd really like to thank all staff, but especially, the maintenance crews and everything as well for just keeping the program running. And we've really kept that communication open between the building committee and even negotiations. They're a hardworking team, and appreciation is passed forward. And you guys will soon be seeing Mr. Scott going forward in new, building updates. So any questions, let me know.
Okay, great. Thank you, Erin.
Rob. Oh, Glenn.
Yeah, I just wanted to introduce Glenn Scott. He's here on our screen, and I wanted to let you know there he is. And normally I would shake his hand as his first board meeting attendance
Rob
here,
pushed
but
me in.
welcome to Glenn Scott.
Thank you. Nice to meet everybody. I look forward to working with everybody.
Welcome, Glenn. Sorry, I didn't see your name on the grid here, so
It Rob did that right in the middle as you were talking. So
okay, cool.
Nice to see you all.
Thank you. Nice to see you. Welcome to the team.
Thank you.
All right. Well, welcome aboard, Glenn. So next up, we have the Policy Committee report. So I will turn that over to Matt as he chairs that.
Hello. In our last meeting, we continued working through cyclical review. The work we did was on Series 1500. And we'll be looking to get a motion to approve a first reading of those policy updates. We also did some review of the language in the Board of School Commissioners Code of Conduct. That's included. And a question that came up for us that we wanted to ask the full board about is the relationship between that code of conduct that's in policy and the operating protocols that were developed a couple of years ago during a retreat session with help from the VSBA. And we were noticing there's quite a bit of overlap, but not complete overlap in what's in our operating protocols. And we didn't know if there should be some kind of reference to the larger code of conduct that's in our in-district policy in that operating document that goes out every 2 weeks.
Joanne, then Aaron.
Good idea. I don't see why we can't just change that. I don't know do we need a vote to change that document or?
Hold the thought.
Just to throw, a reference in. What thought? I don't think.
You do.
Aaron?
So I was going to suggest we actually table this for the first reading because I saw some things that I don't necessarily want to go into, but also maybe some additions. And I know I wasn't present, Matt, so I apologize for last minute on this. But if there's a question and consideration of merging and comparing documents, I think tabling it, extracting it from the first reading is a great idea. And Allison, if I may, then you don't have to call on me again. On 1540, we're missing roll call in the alphabetical list of order of business. And I'm done.
Okay. Thanks, Aaron.
Yeah.
So noted.
So back to you, Matt.
Oh, I just wanted to clarify. So I don't know if we were looking to make any changes to the documents or merge them in any way, but just to reference that, to put a reference in that operating protocols document that comes out that there's a larger code of conduct that's encapsulated in the policy manual.
Aaron?
So then I'd like to make a motion to table policy 1345 and send it back to committee.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay. So the motion on the floor is to table 1345 to send back to committee. And so I see Anne.
I just want to make a comment on a different policy. So can you let me know when it's appropriate to do that, please?
Yeah, we'll have this motion and then have to deal with the rest of them. And Kevin?
If we're going to send this back to committee, is there something specific we were asking the committee to do?
The idea would be that board members would participate and work with the committee to offer those changes to the full board.
Okay.
And really, as it's the first meeting, the first reading, it could still change at that point anyways. We're not voting on the policy.
Okay.
So we're taking it out, so it's a first reading, so it's not even on the table now. And it's just going back to committee, is the proposed motion. Matt?
And I would also suggest people like me to, for our next meeting, when we would be in a couple weeks, 2 weeks from today, would people like me to remind them about a general invite if anybody that's not on that committee wants to come to discuss this a little more?
Yeah,
I'll make sure to email that out.
Great, thank you, Matt.
Okay.
Any other questions from the board on the motion on the table to remove from the first reading and send back to committee policy 1345? And I will note that during school program updates, Commissioner Seward did hop on, so everyone is in attendance for this vote. So all those in favor?
Aye. Charlene.
Oh. And any opposed? Okay, so the motion carries unanimously, so that will go back to the policy committee. And I'll turn it back over to you, Matt, regarding the rest.
Yep, so I'd like to make a motion to accept first reading of policies from the 1500 series with the change that was noted by, was it Aaron?
Yeah.
To number
1540 to add roll call.
1540. Thank you.
Okay. Do I have a second?
I'll second. Second.
I saw Kevin, but I think I heard a different voice. I'm not so sure.
That was my voice.
Okay. Perfect. All right. So any discussion or questions from the board for the first reading of the 1500s? Anne?
Thank you. Policy 1560, the annual organization meeting. I think this was before, while we still had 2 meetings full board meetings per month. So should it be actually April at this time to be the reorg meeting?
It would have to be after the 15th of March, our first full meeting. So yes, that would be appropriate. Erin?
Did we have a special meeting? Because I feel like we had done the one meeting this past election.
No, we did not. Actually, we had no meetings because COVID and yeah, and we didn't meet for some time. So it was after that as well.
I was just trying to remember because it did come into play recently, right?
Yeah. So, but the reorg was a regular meeting. Then we had to just kind of go about differently getting the board members sworn in because there wasn't anything in the interim. Okay. Any other questions from the board? Kevin?
Oh, sorry.
On that same policy 1560, the first line, it says school boards may be resolution. Should that be by resolution?
Okay. Matt can note that for the second reading. And sure. Did you have something else, Matt?
I was going to ask, could it say something like the second business meeting after town meeting day or something? What would be some suggestions for language there?
it would have to be probably something about like the first regular business meeting following March 15th,
Okay.
something like that. Okay, so the motion on the floor is to accept for first reading the policies in the 1500 series. So any other questions? No. Okay, all those in favor? Okay, thank you. And any opposed? Okay, so the motion carries unanimously for the first reading of the 1500s policies. And then next up on our agenda is the old and new business. So the first item up is the superintendent evaluation, and I'll turn that over to Joanne and Matt for an update on the process.
So I believe we have all the evaluations in. I got one yesterday, I think by email, and somebody talked to me today when I was at the office, wanted to send one in. So I think we have all of them. Matt, I left you a nice binder in your doorway today.
Yeah, I'll search for it.
Yeah, right. So, we'll be compiling a report, giving it to Allison. And then she or her designee will meet with Bill. He's got a contract for next year already. And his contract is good till March 2023. And then we'll go over the results in executive session at the next board meeting.
Okay.
And just to talk about the process, all of these were numbered. And the numbers corresponded to whether or not you were a board member or a member of the administration. So I think it's important to see how the administration evaluated him and also how the board did, because sometimes there's some differences, and it's good to know, in total and that. But in terms of, so the front, you would sign the evaluation if you chose, and there's a number on it. Well, when that gets received, it gets separated, and then it gets recorded if you actually did an evaluation. But your responses go to a person who's inputting them without your name. So just a thing I wanted to say to you. Some people, I guess, just choose not to do it, and that's okay. We don't need everybody's, but it would be nice.
Great. Thank you, Joanne. So any questions for Joanne regarding the process or anything with the evaluation? No? Okay, great. Thanks. So next up on the agenda is the Waiting Study Coalition. And as we talked about before in the board meetings, Kathy and I, and then some of the administrative team, Rob, Bill, and Ted have all been at some of the meetings with the Collaborative Waiting Coalitions group in looking at if changes were implemented as was presented to the legislature in 2019. So I have asked Ted to put together some information on the financial impacts that it would have for Rutland City Public School District. Of course, the main target of the waiting study is to make education more accessible and equitable to all the districts. And some districts have more needs and more challenges than other districts. And so the idea behind the study that was done presented some of those challenges that result in schools needing more resources to provide equitable education to students. And some of the things that they targeted were poverty-based waiting, English language learners, and I'm missing the third.
Population density.
Yes, population density for the rural areas. So, and the burden that the population density could have on urban versus rural and the needs of the students. So it's really a proposal to move from a more census-based funding to a needs-based funding statewide. And the interesting thing about it is obviously changes might not benefit some as much as others, but the great variance that's seen that there's not many things that could also benefit urban and rural areas, yet having a more equitable funding mechanism in place at the state level has shown to do that. So the coalition is comprised of a demographically diverse group of schools, districts, and other singular school boards. And so Ted has prepared some slides to go over some of the information and what it's all about and the implications that it could have on Rutland City Public Schools. So I thank Ted for all his work on this, and I'll turn it over to him.
Sure. It's a pleasure. Thank you very much, Allison. I'm going to go ahead and see if I can share my screen here just to review a couple of charts with you. Let me, right here. Can you see my screen okay? Great. Okay, so I want to just start off with an overview talking about the original mandate and then some current directions. As Allison talked about, the basic objective here is to help ensure that all students receive substantial equality of educational opportunity throughout the state. And the state goes about using a number of mechanisms and cost factors to try and differentiate, as is indicated at the top of this chart, and measure differences in the cost to educate students who may have dissimilar learning needs, come from different socioeconomic backgrounds, and certainly geographic locations. They've been using something called a pupil weighting system for a few decades to do this. That system calculates something called equalized pupils per district. And I'm going to try and be very careful not to get into, the technical aspects of this, which probably most people don't need. But the main point is they try and normalize for some of those factors, dissimilar needs, different backgrounds, different geography, to come up with what you might call a standardized or equalized pupil. So that, for example, if we have somebody who doesn't know the English language as their native language, it might take a little bit more effort and instruction to bring that person along than somebody who is, grew up with that being their native language. So what the study would do, the weighting system would do, is to say, oh, well, we're going to give credit for not one student, but maybe 1.2 students in that case, if one were to assume that it takes 20% more effort. And that's just an example. That's not what the weight is. But the point is that the weighting system and this calculation of equalized pupils is trying to say, well, okay, we know there are different mixes of various socioeconomic factors and others throughout the districts, throughout the states. Let's try and put everybody on a relatively even basis to measure the resources that they need. But unfortunately, these cost factors and weights have not been modified to any significant extent in more than 20 years. So the studies that we've talked about have come out and concluded, and by the way, the 2019 study, which was referred to, you see at the bottom of the chart, called Pupil Weighting Factors Report. That was a study that was led by a UVM team, but it incorporated national experts from around the country. They made several very important conclusions, and the bottom line on that is that the current system doesn't fully recognize differences in various state mandated programs, whether it be special education or anything else. And I'm just going to briefly read a couple of the words that come out of the report because it's a very, very telling. So the report concluded, among other things, that neither the factors considered nor the value of the weights reflect contemporary educational circumstances and costs. And in addition, the report concluded that the existing weights have a weak tie, if any, with evidence describing the costs of educating students with disparate needs or operating schools in different contexts. So, obviously, people have concluded that the original intent of the system has not kept up with the changes that have occurred. And that's why back in 2018, some of the original legislation that kicked this off said, look, we need to go back around and look at these weighting factors and ask a few basic questions. Should the current weights we have be modified? Should we add new weights? Should we add new factors? What about the system of census grants that's used for funding special education? Should that be adjusted? So a lot of very important questions are being raised because there are very serious consequences for many districts in terms of the resources that they have to provide the essential services we've been hearing about tonight. In 2020, some of the results of that report that we described from 19 were simulated using actual 2020 results for the fiscal year. And I'm going to show you what came out of that in just a moment. It's very interesting, and it could have very significant implications for our district. But what I don't have on this chart, and I do want to recap for you very briefly and to bring you really up to date, is so now as of early 2021, there are two bills pending in the legislature to move this forward. One is in the House, it's House 54, and one is in the Senate, it's S13. They're very similar in some respects, but the Senate 13 bill would require now the Agency of Education to develop a plan of action on this, and to develop that plan no later than December 15th of this year. What is a plan of action? What would that involve? Well, the S13 would specify three elements. They want a timeline for a phase-in, and what's very interesting, this Senate bill would call for a phase-in over 3 years. So one of the things you wonder about is how soon could this come? If they took the maximum number of years, 3 years, just by the way, you can do the math, but it would be fiscal year 2026 before it would be fully phased in. It might occur earlier than that, but that's one of the things we keep in mind from a funding perspective near term. The second element is they want this plan of action to be sensitive to its impact upon both property taxes in a district and the school budgets. And thirdly, they want a consideration of how any of these changes would interact with other laws and regulations. Now, those are a lot of words, but to me, what that says is this is a very complex area with a lot of factors that have to be considered, some of which go against each other. And you give in one, then you lose in another. Then, once this plan of action is delivered on December 15th, it's going to be delivered to 4 committees in the legislature: the House and the Senate Committees on Education, the House Ways and Means Committee, and the Senate Finance Committee. So there are going to be at least 4 committees that are going to be looking into this. And during the coming year, the calendar year, there are supposed to be at least 6 public information sessions to talk about where this goes. So it's a long way of saying perhaps that there's still quite a bit of work to be done, but at least they're beginning to get some definition. The next chart that I'd just like to show you gives you the results of that simulation that I talked about. And the big headline here is you just go by this simulation, and this is only one of several simulations, but if you applied that to the results that we had in 2020 for Rutland City, our equalized tax rate would drop by about 20%. It would drop by about 31 cents from $1.45 to $1.14. Everything else held the same. So, if you think about the fact that Rutland City taxpayers paid about $5 million in local homestead taxes, 20% of $5 million is $1 million. So this could have a very material impact on the district. Going the other way, one of the reasons for this is because it would give Rutland City more credit for these equalized pupils because the city has a greater percentage of students coming from families with lower incomes or economically disadvantaged. We would get additional credit per pupil, if you will. So the numbers of students don't change, but the equalized standard goes up by about 20%. And as you can see, we'd go from a little over 2,000 equalized pupils to more like 2,500. Now, Allison spoke a moment ago about the fact that if you look statewide, there are going to be some winners in this and there would going to be some losers. And based on the simulation results, what this says is about 2/3 of the total districts, 77 districts, and they have about 59% of today the equalized pupils, would recognize an average drop of about 18 cents in the homestead tax rate. As you can see, that average drop is less than the drop that Rutland City would realize. So that gives you a flavor for where we are and how much we would gain relative to many others, given our socioeconomic situation. 39 districts, they estimate, with about 40% of the equalized pupils would have an average increase of about 16 cents. Now, what's really interesting about this is the Senate, in their bill, is already considering the fact that if there are going to be districts that are going to have significant increases in their rate, the state's going to need to do something to mitigate that, and they're already looking at several mechanisms to do that. So, for example, they say if your tax rate's going to go up by more than a certain percentage, they're going to phase that in and they're going to do some offsets for you to ease the pain. In terms of special education grants, they're not planning to do anything with that right now as of the current state, but of course that could change. So let me just go to the next chart then and show you a couple more factors here. So I know there's a lot of numbers here and a lot of things on this chart, and I apologize for that. I don't want to go through everything, but I put some arrows off to the left side because this speaks to the areas that Allison was mentioning a few minutes ago. It's, student need, population density, some other factors. And you can see if you look at the measure, the first line, the poverty rate, the current law gives an equalized weighting of 1.25. So if you've got one student who comes from an economically disadvantaged situation, they'll give you an equivalent of, they're going to call that 1 1/4 equalized students. Well, look what happens to the weight under the updated B1 simulation. It increases to 318% of the existing weight. So that's one of the reasons why you see in a case like Rutland City, we would benefit so significantly from this updated and more contemporary way of evaluating it. And then you can see on the second line, as far as the English language learners, that also would increase very significantly to more than 200% of the existing weight from 1.2 to 2.58. Got a couple of other arrows there just to show you that they would add a middle school grade weighting that doesn't exist right now. They are going to have factors for population density, but that wouldn't help Rutland City because, as you can see, there'll be a factor that is relatively, as Allison was saying, applying to rural areas. If you look at our population of around 15 or 16,000 and the fact that we've got about 7.5 square miles in the city, you're looking at a population density of about 2,000 or 1,900. So that won't benefit us. Let's see, what else do I have here for you? Oh, and after that is the appendix, but I would just show you really quickly, and you can find these results if you like. The study that was led by the UVM researchers is extremely well done and well written. So if you want to learn more about this, I would strongly recommend taking a little time. And I've just highlighted what I thought were a couple of key aspects of that report. And again, as Allison alluded to at the beginning, where they talk about some of the goals, which are to achieve common standards or outcome, a recognition that some communities may not be able or willing to pay for all of the services that we're identifying are important for the education of our students. And I mentioned a couple of these other things like having, that to me is shocking that they would come out and actually recognize that the existing weights have weak ties, if any, with the evidence describing the differences. So this study is long overdue, and if the legislation that's currently in the House and the Senate does move, and there's question about how fast that will go through, then at least it will put into motion some deadlines, as I was describing earlier, about getting a plan of action. But I will tell you one last thing, and that is, and granted, this is my first year through the budget, but when I look and I use the spreadsheets that come out of the Agency of Education, the level of complexity that has grown over time to calculate these equalized pupils, I just look at it, and while I'm still learning about it, I've seen complex systems before, and it's going to be, the transition will be extraordinarily challenging. So challenging means time consuming, and it's going to be, we're going to have to be, as Allison has recommended, we're going to need to be very, very involved in this, because there's a lot at stake and it could go in a lot of different directions. So with that, I'll stop and let me ask if anybody has any questions about what we talked about briefly tonight, and I appreciate your attention.
Okay, so one of the reasons for bringing this up tonight is to get the board to potentially approve some money to help the coalition to further along the mission of getting the legislature to take up this weighting study and the proposed changes along with it. So that is kind of one of the reasons to maybe put some money behind the savings that we could potentially see, and the ability to get more supports for our more economically challenged students, and the tough work and additional work that the district has to do to make sure their needs are met. So does anyone have any questions about the information Ted presented or myself? Brittany?
Sorry, I just had to finally unmute. So are you looking for us to vote tonight on giving a proposed allotted amount of money?
Yes. Yep. Okay. I would entertain a motion regarding the amount.
Okay. Just my opinion on it, we just had to let go of 20, we have staff members that are not coming back, and I just can't see, it's a wonderful idea, but I just can't see that the city residents are going to be okay with us getting rid of support staff when we want to introduce this program. So it will be a no for me, but I just think we need to kind of think about that a little bit. My part.
Okay, Joanne?
So maybe we make the motion and then talk about it. Is that all right? Okay. So first, all right, so we have received an email from the Attorney General. I just want to, that I'd like to be included in the motion. And basically, the email says that, from the Attorney General, says that there is no reason why this expenditure of state funds would not be permissible. And that is from actually the General Counsel of the Agency of Education. So I want to keep that email as part of the motion. And so my motion is, in reliance on the email from the attorney, I'm sorry, it's on the attorney for the Agency of Education, which I make part of my motion, I move that we spend $3,000 on supporting the Waiting Coalition. So that's the motion.
Do I have a second? Kathy? Okay.
Unmute. I second it. I've had to find my mute. I apologize. I got kicked off before, so I'm on a new device.
Oh, goodness. Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
So the motion on the floor is to participate with the Waiting Coalition with $3,000 to further the cause. So any discussion from the board? Hurley?
Is there an amount that other schools are contributing, or how did we come up with the 3,000?
So ironically, yes. So the larger school district supervisory unions are doing $3,000. The ironic part is we're kind of playing around with the idea of, do we use equalized pupils to decide how much the people involved are committing? But so it's generally based on school size, and some of the schools participating are single small schools, and some are larger, like us, larger districts, and we're also our own supervisory union. So some of those are breaking it down on the smaller levels, as you can imagine, because some might benefit more than others, even within a supervisory union, depending on their demographics. Oops, sorry, I'm muted. I saw Aaron and then Kevin.
So really, I think I need more information on this whole process and what it's going to. And then where is the money all going? I feel like this is sort of like a lobby action where all the districts are going to redo this. I feel like I need to know where the money's going, whether it's going to state, AOE or how that's being distributed. It just doesn't seem very clear to me how this money from all these districts are being applied to this study. If you have clarity, that'd be great. But I would have to say we table this until we have more information, truly. This is supposed to be an enclosure, not an action item.
So the information on it is contained in all the emails that goes to all the board members from the Waiting Coalition study. And the coalition group has formed a nonprofit amongst various school boards throughout the state. And that is where the money is going, specifically earmarked for this waiting study. Kevin? And then
So
Joanne?
my questions are very similar to Aaron's. What are we getting for this money? If this is the right thing to do, the right thing for our state to do, it seems odd that we should be paying to have our state do the right thing. Is there another way that we could put energy forward that wouldn't be dollars, but would be effective? I don't know. It seems weird to have a public entity like a school board investing in lobbying, which it seems like that's what we're doing.
So that is the clarification that we got from the Agency of Education, that we can do that and that other schools are doing it. Some of the schools are looking at ways to do it. So there is another school that is independently hired a lobbyist. There is another district that is looking at legal action. And then there's the coalition of school boards that's looking to work together to further it. And to answer why isn't the state just doing it, as you see, it's going to impact different areas differently, and changes can be difficult because we're not going to get a bigger pot of money. It's just going to have to be redistributed.
Right.
Okay. I have Joanne and then Matt.
Oh. I'm on, sorry, I thought I was muted. So this is going to be a fight. And I think that joining together with other districts is probably good. And yes, Kevin and Aaron, there are other ways to do this. We can do it. We can't get people to meetings, for God's sakes. I'm just putting it out there. Are we really going to do it? Individuals, this is our volunteer job. How many hours a week do we have? I mean, do we have 5-10 more hours a week? I mean, I'm looking at it like we have money we have the money to spend. It's not like we're asking for $30,000. It's $3,000. It's not going to increase the tax rate. It's not going to take somebody's job. I just, it's money that, it's from legal fees, really. And I just think we can't, we could have Bill go, the attorney, and go fight for it, or we can join with these folks and join our resources and maybe get bigger bang for the buck. That's all. I don't know. We just seem to have a lot of discussion about $3,000, a lot more than, huge projects and stuff. So it's just fascinating to me. I think now's the time to jump on it, especially, it's very, very timely with what's going on in the legislature.
Matt?
I wanted to mention, in terms of, in reference to what Kevin was saying, I think it is lobbying, but in recognition that there are a coalition of other school districts that themselves are independent entities that are going to be pushing back against this change. And so I personally didn't see the lobbying element as inappropriate, just given that we're an independent entity separate from these other entities and trying to influence public policy at the state level. I also thought that the $3,000 is a very small expense in relation to the potential savings to city taxpayers that could be achieved through successfully pushing for this change in the weighting formula.
Thank you, Matt. Kathy?
Just to continue on Matt's point, the $3,000 spent by ourselves would not get us very far. The fact that all of these school boards, districts are coming together and pooling their money is going to take the action a lot further or have a lot more influence in the legislature.
Erin?
So I will say in theory, I think it's a good idea, but I still think we need more information. We need to know what other districts are, involved, on which sides, how they're going to be impacted. If this is the difference in how things are going to be impacted, I want to see the real data before I put any money in. And to Kathy's point, if all the districts listed here in round numbers donate $3,000, that's over $350,000 this nonprofit is getting in their hand. So, yes, cumulative effort is great, but we have to be really careful what we're putting it towards. And I don't think there's enough information here to make the decision personally. And I think we need to know more about how it's going to affect regionally and statewide before I can invest in this. But conceptually, love the idea.
Dina?
Just to clarify language and for the sake of everybody who's maybe listening, the coalition are schools combined together that want to support the movement of the study forward, correct?
Correct.
So we can assume or infer from that there may be a coalition on the other side that will form to oppose the study being pushed forward. And looking as just as we understand the map of Vermont, not that we are experts, but the coalition that may or may not be formed on the other side may or may not have put in whatever funds that they may see fit to go after their part of the side of the deal, which is to suppress the weighing study. So in my mind, I think if I'm going to invest $3,000 from our money to a potential, not only a reduction in taxpayer rate, but also a potential of ability to retain more staff and maybe rehire more staff, or maybe expand the services that our schools may need to support what the school improvement plans that we've all just kind of set nicely and listened to. Let's say we lose that money. I still think it's not, yes, it's money, but it's small enough of an investment considering the potential gain that we can make, assuming, again, that there will be forming of other forces going forward to push whether we do it or not, somebody else is going to do something, so I think it will be good to have more information in terms of who's leading the nonprofit, who's going to be the forefront of the nonprofit. What happens if they don't use all the money? Do we get the money back? All these type of details, but I don't want to barricade the process because it's happening now, right? It feels like things are moving forward now. I don't want to barricade the process, but I think we should have some maybe a little bit more information coming in terms of who is kind of the front people of this. What happens to the money if things go, nowhere? But again, I think it's very important for us to not wait and see or hold the boat in the port, because there will be mobilizing of troops in all directions at the same time. So
Thank you, Dina. I have Charlene, then Matt.
Can you hear me? I just wanted to say quickly that I am hearing you, Aaron, and Brittany first, and Kevin. I appreciate what you're saying, because I was thinking along those lines as well earlier, but it's my understanding that the district is stand to gain quite a bit from this, and kind of to echo what Dina was saying, I realize we're spending money out here, which, trust me, is the last thing that we want to do as far as with the expenses that are going. But what we have to gain from this $3,000, this investment into our future to hopefully gain strides with the coalition forward, this is going to be in our favor. It's my understanding. So I think I'm willing to support the potential that we can gain from this. I just kind of want to echo a little bit what Dina was saying.
Thank you, Charlene. Matt, and then Anne.
Is it urgent that this money be allocated, or could it wait a month and it would be okay?
So to answer that, if a bill does not make it to legislative crossover, which is the second week in March, it is dead. And that means it'll be another biennium before it will be taken up again. And I had Anne and then Aaron.
Thanks. I would echo some of what Dina was saying about, I'd like some more information. I realized that you guys acted kind of sort of as a ad hoc committee in researching this, and I appreciate the work that you did on it. I'd like to hear about fiduciary responsibility, something that I think Dina inferred by the nonprofit and what is the nonprofit, and what happens with the money. I also agree it's not a huge expenditure for what sounds like it could be a good savings for us. I was going to ask about the time frame as well, and it sounds like it has to be done by the second week of March. So tonight is the decision, it sounds like. And then where does that money come from? Do we have that, Ted, maybe? Or thank you.
Okay, so to answer more about, because everything is kind of had to move along faster just in time to catch us up with the legislation and getting this through legislature, the coalition has been fortunate enough to have a member from one of the Windsor districts that he's the one that is held responsible right now for everything. So while the nonprofit is being created and the bylaws are being looked at, that will be reviewed by multiple districts, attorneys, and a board presumably made up of, a handful of members of the coalition would all be put in place for the expenditure of the money. Aaron?
Okay. So the fact that it's not even established yet is even more alarming to me. But here's what I'm going to say, and I really think we all need to take a moment, because 11 years on this board, going into my 12th, we have never allocated a penny to legislation. So I don't expect this board to start allocating public money to legislation today or any day, quite honestly, because that's not how we've operated for 11 years. Maybe prior, maybe in the future, but I just think we have to set some standards. And, you know, the original channels is our legislators. We go through our representatives, and we've always had really good luck with that. So why change it now and throw, you know, good money after money, bad money, I guess. I don't know. But that's my point, was 11 years, we've never done this once.
And just to reference that, every year we pay dues to the VSBA, who hires lobbyists to act on behalf of different school boards. So, or the initiatives of what VSBA decides on. So we do in fact spend money on lobbying.
VSBA is an informative for board members and superintendents and so forth. So it's yes, I agree, we do in that sense, Allison, but I think it's more for informative information. And they are the Vermont School Board Association for a reason.
Anne?
So would I be right to assume that the VSBA would not take a position on this? Or if they do you know what it is?
They are split, so they are not taking it up this year. Brittany?
Do we know how long the study is running for? Like, do we have a time frame? I would agree, and I do agree. I think that it would be beneficial. I just think the information, we don't have it all. I'm still not getting the emails from them, and that kind of, I'm not comfortable voting on something that I don't know completely. Do we know the time frame of the study at all? Of like what we're looking at for the 3,000?
Study's done, I believe.
The study's done. It concluded.
So the study's done and completed.
Reported out December of 2019.
Okay, so then this would just be going forward and supporting
implementing
them to put it into legislation. Okay.
Correct.
Thank you.
Hurley?
How many schools are we talking that we would be in alliance with? How many districts?
They're still working on the spreadsheet. The big ones are there's us, there's Burlington, there's Winooski, there's some of the rural schools in the Northeast Kingdom, there's Windsor, 2 of the districts there. I forget how they're divided, north or south, east, and then there's independently, Dover is doing their own, and there's a few other smaller schools involved. Dina?
Just to clarify my position on this, I think, yes, it will be nice to know a little bit more details, but I think, I don't think, maybe I'm wrong, that there has been a recent such proposal that will shift the way education is funded in the state like this, to this extreme. And whether we do something or not, again, some people are doing something. So the larger, more, I don't know how to put it in nice words, like the more well-to-do districts are mobilizing as well. Just so we are clear, there's when there is a coalition formed, there's usually another one on the other side. And I think when there's such a big ticket item like this, this is something that can transform the way we do everything, the way we staff, the way we negotiate, the way we do every little thing in our district. I think sometimes you have to run the course a little bit differently than you did before. So as long as it's all checked out as, something that, everybody on the legal team is good with, I think it will be important for us not to stand on the sidelines, because this is directly and profoundly going to affect how we look like in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years from now. And this is why I think we are seeing this elaborative operation, because it's different than anything else that it was ever presented, unless my history is not correct. So I think it will be wise to support a small fund to potentially gain something that will transform everything, or a lot of things.
Kevin?
I'm being persuaded by the discussion here. And when we're talking about the number of districts, I'm looking at Ted's spreadsheet that says 77 districts with 59% of equalized pupils would have an average drop of 18 cents in homestead tax rate. So there's 77 other districts that would benefit similarly. So there is a bunch of folks out there. I don't know how many other districts are going to contribute, but it does seem like $3,000 is a good thing to chip in for a good cause, and we would have a lot to gain.
Charlene?
And just to kind of echo what Kevin was saying, that's a good point he's bringing up. And I do feel, Brittany, I can feel, I did kind of sort of feel how you're feeling too, because I don't have enough knowledge on the topic to really feel comfortable about it. But from what I'm hearing and from the people that seem to know what this is all about, Dina, you seem to be really up on it as well. And I feel like it sounds to me like we have a lot to gain here. So I just wanted to put that out there because Brittany, I do feel how you're kind of feeling. Like it's because I don't have enough knowledge, I guess. So,
Anne?
I feel the same way. Like I said before, I feel like the committee of you guys that have been following this, that's why we have committees in my mind, so that, not everybody has to spend all the hours. And I trust your judgment. I am also being persuaded. I wanted to know what happens if our district, do nothing and don't jump in with a contribution or with our money. Does the outcome just affect every district, how it's going to affect it, no matter if the district contributes or not?
Yes. There would just be less voices behind pushing the legislation. Okay. Any other questions? Okay, so then we shall, motion on the floor is to expend $3,000 to the Waiting Coalition Work Group to further the waiting study. And Joanne has the exact wording. We did have approval from the Agency of Education.
Roll call vote, please.
Yep, that's what I just said. So we will do a roll call vote. And that is the motion on the floor. So let's see, Brittany?
No.
Hurley?
Yes.
Anne?
Yes.
Dina?
Yes.
Matt?
Yes.
Charlene?
yes.
Kathy?
Yes.
Kevin?
Yes.
Aaron?
No.
And Joanne?
Yes.
Okay, I didn't miss anyone, did I? I was going by the list on old minutes, so that's why I was a little out of order. Okay, so we have 2 no's and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Did I not? Wait. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 yeses. Is that right?
You have 8 yeses and 2 nos.
I must have not written one down. I was like, I don't have the right total. Thank you, Rob. Okay, so if the minutes can reflect that, we had roll call vote with Brittany Kavakis and Aaron Schimpf on the no, and the other 8 members in attendance with yes. So the motion carries. Thanks for the help, Rob. Okay, so now let me find this again. So the next thing on our agenda is the RHS mascot proposal. And so I will turn that over, I guess, to Bill Olson, and I think there's Greg Schillinger. So I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks, Allison. And I'm going to pass it to Greg. Greg's here with 3 of the students who are on the mascot committee from the high school, and they're going to present the process that they used and their recommendation to the board.
All right. I am going to try to share my screen. Let me know if that's visible. Everybody can see that? All right.
Yes, you're good.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so first of all, thank you for the opportunity to present the work of the Mascot Advisory Committee. I'm pleased to present this work on behalf of the committee along with committee members who are here this evening, Caleb Dundas, Catherine Moore, and Jack Wallace. So this overview, which is our agenda for this evening, this overview belies a much more complex process of 3 months of weekly meetings filled with survey data, disagreements, and discussions. I must begin with a public acknowledgement of the students who address this work with maturity, civility, and a commitment to the common good. I am sincerely proud of these students, and I thank them for their good work. Tonight, Caleb, Catherine, and Jack and I will quickly review the process that we followed in order to be able to bring you the suggestion for a new mascot as you requested. You also have a written report in the board packet with additional detail. I will start off as an introduction and then turn it over to the students before wrapping it up at the end. Following the board's motion back in October, I sent an invitation to every high school student inviting them to join this committee. Roughly 20 students responded to some short answer questions about the process, and we began the process of meeting weekly. We started our work with a look at the Rutland City Public Schools vision statement as a statement of who we aspire to be, and we then carefully unpacked the board's motion as a statement of our task. What you see included here on this slide are screenshots of our work on those 2 topics. With that, I'll hand things off to Caleb Dundas to talk about the next step in the process.
After we had completed that step, then we proceeded to develop a set of criteria of which our new mascot would have to include. So beside the bulleted list of all of them, there's a number, and that's how many people mentioned that that's an important criteria. It's not so if you look at integrity, several would have been sportsmanlike conduct or plain fair, but we kind of voted as a group to determine similar criteria should go together just to distill down to make the process a little bit smoother. So once we developed our set of criteria, we moved on to the next step.
So on the left, there's a screenshot of our mascot suggestion form that was sent out to the community looking for suggestions for new names. Then on the right is the list of the 10 most repeated suggestions that we received. So with those 10, we had a survey to the committee, which I believe is on the next slide.
this survey went out to our committee members of which ones we thought most fit the criteria of working hard and persistence. And we then made a jam board, which are those Post-it notes in the bottom right corner with positives and negatives of each name, which each name did have negatives. We wanted to point that out, and they all had positives. So within the committee, we voted on the 10 names to get it down to 4. Each student in the committee had 5 votes, how they could use in whatever way they wanted. You could put all 5 in one name, or you could do 3 and 2, etc. And then that's how we got down to the 4 names on the top right of that slide, which then I'll pass the next slide on to Jack.
So once we had narrowed down the suggestions to 4 mascots, we sent a survey out to the 3 schools to see what their opinions on the mascots were, and we noticed that Ravens and Royals were 2 clear leaders, but because neither of them had a majority throughout the schools, and because we included a write-in option that may have thrown off the results of the final 2 mascots, we decided to do a runoff survey. And these are the results of that survey. And Ravens is the clear leader.
So thank you, Caleb, Catherine, and Jack. It is important to note that in looking at each of the mascot options, we found that they were agothic-ecological and included both positives and negatives. That being said, the process included the inherent good of students applying what they've learned in their classes. The slide that you have in front of you are standards that I took actually from course standards. They're math, social studies, and English. All of these standards were actually applied by the students on the committee as a part of this process. So as you can see, the board's motion was for the administration to work with the student body. My interest in this process was to prioritize the student body by having a committee of students guide and facilitate the process, by giving them and the greater community the opportunity to suggest ideas for a new mascot, and then for students in grades 3 through 12 to cast votes in 2 rounds to make the final choice for a suggestion to the board. In conclusion, on behalf of the Mascot Advisory Committee, our suggestion is the Ravens. If board members have questions, we're happy to address those at this time.
Okay, great. Thank you, Greg, and to Caleb and Catherine and Jack for joining us this evening to go over the process. I know you guys have put in a lot of hours and a lot of hard work in kind of breaking this down and coming to this conclusion. So any board members have any questions for Greg or the students?
If you could not share the screen, then we can figure out who.
Perfect. Did you have a question, Hurley?
I do. All right,
we'll start with you.
I'm assuming that you looked up all the meanings of the Raven, realizing that in a lot of religious affiliations, it means death. And we're looking at a lot of connotations. And in fact, some connotations are highly negative in the Native American theories about the raven and what it symbolizes. So I'm not quite sure if we're being hypocrites by looking at another symbol used in Native American culture as that we're just jumping onto another one. So I'd like the kids to address that, please.
I think maybe if we just funnel things through Bill or Greg for appropriateness, I just don't want the students to feel that they're put on a spot.
I just want to know what they did for the studying of that and what they looked at it for the cultural size and the Native American culture.
So
Kayla, is that?
So I was in charge of talking about the criteria we had to address in terms of picking the choices. So we put together the survey to send out to all the different schools. I'm not sure if you, or actually it went out to the general public for the suggestions. I'm not sure if you've gotten a chance to look through it, but essentially as a series of questions, basically making you reconsider your choice before you submit it. So I think that the pondering of, is this a good choice that I'm suggesting, has been done on a more personal level by the people that suggested the Ravens, and then I proceeded to the voting. So I don't necessarily think it's fair to put the burden of blame on the student body who simply voted on the choices that were given them. I think it should be more that we met the requirement because everyone that suggested it had already had to think deeply about it.
And Caleb, I'm not putting the blame on the student body. I guess what I'm looking at is making sure that the administration did their due diligence to make sure that those names that came up did not have any references, negative references going forward. I do not blame the student body. So please don't think that's what I'm blaming.
So, Madam Chair, may I?
I'm not sure who's speaking.
I'm sorry, it's Greg.
Oh, Greg. Yes. Sorry. I'm I hear a voice. I didn't see anyone moving. Yes, Greg. So yeah, if you could address that, and I would maybe ask that the board ask their questions to you, probably you or Bill, and maybe you could direct to the students as appropriate, if that would be okay with you, Greg.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
In answer, one of the learning processes of the work of this committee was every single option had a component that someone could argue with. That was unanimous. Everything from Rangers to Royals, concern with Royals being about class structure. I think depending on the culture that you choose, there's a myth that's associated with almost every animal or natural phenomenon. So I think in doing that due diligence, what I specifically looked for was what would someone argue with on this particular option. I was successful in every case in finding something that someone could argue with. So what I found where that brought me to was a sense of, the direction of the board was to come back to the board with a suggestion. Yes, that due diligence was done. And we talked about, and you saw those Post-it notes, those were an example of the pluses and minuses in looking at these different options. So yes, in answer to the question, due diligence was done.
Kevin, and then Aaron.
First of all, I want to express my appreciation for all of you, Mr. Schillinger, and especially the students, for the time you've put into this, and a process that involved input from lots and lots of people. I think the fact that a raven is a very complicated image is probably very fitting for the town of Rutland, and I think there are the positives outweigh the negatives from my reading of it. I just wanted to express appreciation for what you guys have done. It's been very impressive. Thank you very much.
Aaron?
I as well would like to express the appreciation for going through the process. As you know, I wish it was done a lot sooner, but to the students and everything. My one question I have, and is the raters, the actual raters in the original survey. I didn't see a percentage of who actually wrote that in, because I feel like it's really apples to apples. We need to compare the population that voted to keep the raters versus alternative names. So that I'm curious about. And we don't really have to answer it. I'm just more curious. The other piece I would like to put on the record is that in public communication, the board did receive correspondence on this matter. So I do encourage the board to go to their emails and look at the correspondence regarding this matter, because I feel like that really should have been read in the communication section. I didn't honestly see it until some of the other communication came up during the meeting. So I know that board members have seen it, but I encourage you all to, and hopefully that can potentially also be read in the next communication section.
Brittany?
I just have a couple of questions, Greg. You had talked about how every mascot that was named had some negative connotation. Now, we have gotten rid of the word, we don't use the word Red Raiders, and on there you had Red Hawk and Red Wings, both that reference the Native Americans. If we are not being sensitive to everybody, how can we pick a mascot or a logo, really, because we don't really have a mascot anymore, but how can we allow the students to vote for something when our administration is saying everyone has a negative connotation to it, and it reflects and it goes against somebody else? A raven in my religion means death. I'm a Catholic, so for me, a raven is negative, and I'm not like using that like as a negative. But if we're going to say that there's always something against it, there needs to be something that is, flat across the board. I agree that the kids did a great job. I would like to see what the students voted on, what the percentage that was voted on, that was written in for the raters. And the only other thing is, I was at a local yoga class, and it was presented to me by a parent that one of the words, the presented mascots, was the railers. And that mother was appalled at the fact that their student was using it as a sexual connotation. Now, as a female, and most females I would agree, the word railers can be used that way. And I think we really need to, and the reason why her son voted for that was for that reason. And there was a large group of that junior class that thought it was really funny that they be called the railers. I just think that I appreciate the work that's done and that the kids putting in. I do kind of question all of the kids that were in there. I think we needed to have more of a range of kids in the committee. But I think a lot of the terms that we used can definitely be put in other contexts. So
a couple things. Everyone who responded to the short answer was on the committee. So whatever range there was, it was a coalition of the willing. So in terms of your implication, in terms of the range, everybody who was willing to be a part of the committee was able to be so. Secondly, the committee's suggestion is the Ravens. So whatever problems there were with options that have been eliminated, granted, our recommendation is the Ravens. So again, the work within the committee, both the students as well as I, in looking and doing that due diligence, what we came to understand is, I think basically, and twice now the point has been brought up about, were there folks who wrote in the Raiders? Absolutely, there were. Like, folks, this is a controversial decision. Mm-hmm. Like, this body voted 6-4. I would imagine, and I have no scientific evidence to this, but I would imagine if you polled the community, there's some kind of a similar split. So if the point is some people wanted to stay the Ravens, excuse me, some people wanted to stay the Raiders, granted, yes, they do. There were folks when there were write-in options who wrote in Raiders. I'm stretching my own memory here. I want to say for the high school version, I think it was something like 9 or 10% on the write-in option. I think had written in Raiders. There are students who disagree with the board's decision to change the mascot. As we all know, there are community members who disagree with the board's decision to change the mascot. My point is that was not our job. The reason we started with the motion was to clearly articulate what is and what is not our job. Our job was very direct from the board, which was that decision is over. Your job is to work together to come to us with a new mascot. That's what we did.
No, I agree. I think you did. I just think that the choices that were on there to begin with, to give the kids, weren't necessarily choices that, to be quite honest, I'm completely offended by railers even being on there. I don't really care so much about the other ones. I saw, it is what it is. But to even give that as an option of the top 4 to put out in a survey for even our 3rd graders, when I heard that in a local yoga class, Ravens, it is what it is. But when we give these options, we want to be appropriate with all of our options. And I don't think that some of the 4 options that were given, we need to give them the best that we can.
Next up, I have Matt. And then after Matt, Isabella, our student rep, wanted to talk. And I see Caleb has his hand up too. So I'll go in that order.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to comment about the issue that Aaron pointed out in the correspondence, the letter, but I think I disagreed with the premise of that correspondence. And I think some of that conversation is around in here because the individuals who raised the concern about the Raiders mascot and asked for the change, what their concern is that you are making a mascot out of Native American people. That calling the mascot the Red Raiders and Raiders after the red was taken is still in direct reference to actual human beings who live in our community. And that was the concern of those individuals and why they wanted that change. And I think that the discussion over whether maybe, for example, the Ravens is symbology used in Native American culture. Certainly the Raven is symbology used in many cultures across the world. But I think that misses the point about what the initial concern from the advocates for the change was, which is not having a mascot that turns human beings into a mascot in our community. And, I think we've seen that issue play out with pro sports teams changing their names for exactly that reason. We know many colleges and universities have chosen to change their mascots for that very reason. And it's about turning minority groups of people into mascots. That's the concern, not so much that you use a symbol that might be of interest to a particular cultural group.
Okay, Isabella?
My point actually went quite with Matthew's. Raiders relates to people and an actual culture when, like, Raven is an animal, and every animal could have a negative connotation to it or a cultural history. And I think I'd be more comfortable being a Raven that might have a history in a culture than a Raider, which is a negative word for a Native American. So.
Thank you, Isabella. Caleb, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I did. It was just in terms of railers meeting the criteria we had selected. 2 of the criteria that we had to analyze had to do with the history. And that was, no one in the committee was like writing in their recommendations. All of the names we were presented with came from the community input, and all of the people that put railers into that had discussed in good faith that the reason they were putting that was that the railroad in Vermont has a huge history, especially in Vermont. I mean, the entire plaza downtown with Walmart and Price Chopper used to be a rail yard. And a railer, if you look at like the actual dictionary definition and ignore the connotations, is someone that built a railroad. So that was chosen in good faith. And one other thing I wanted to speak about is what Matt said, with the Red Hawks and the other ones that possibly were symbols in culture. They were not picked to represent that culture. They were just picked because they're a species around the area that we thought could represent us. So there was no like picking something because it was inappropriate and possibly funny. That wasn't what went on. It was picked based off the historical aspect.
Thank you. I have Hurley and then Aaron.
Well, and I'm going to address Matt's comment. That's really subjective, Matt, because the word raiders just means a warrior. And it is not directly tied to the Native American culture. And if you look at different individuals who have said that, that's the subjective part of that. That's why the Oakland Raiders are the Oakland Raiders with a shield, and that's what they use. It's not tied in directly to the Native Americans. I will say that what I really am appalled at, besides all of this, is that when I looked at the names that came forward, the 4 finalists, one was sexist, which was a ram, which is a male sheep. And you're looking at a lot of things that are subjective again. And I think if we're really going to get into something subjective, we're in the middle of a pandemic right now. And the raven has always meant the Black Plague and the death and all of that too. I think that's very poor taste that we're doing this now. I said it right from the beginning. I think it's going to have a negative connotation on us. I think we were railroaded in the beginning, and that's all I'm going to say.
I have Aaron and then Dina.
Thank you. And I put a lot of thoughts together. I apologize before. For the record, Frederick Adams emailed us, and that is what I would like to have as communication for the record on this. And then Caleb, what you synthesized and how you just expressed the process and what the committee did and the work as a unified group you did to get through this process based on direction was really incredible. I really want to commend you for that last little bit you had, because I mean, you guys obviously took it seriously and you took it responsibly and you were charged with a mission and you executed it very well, I believe, based on the parameters you were given. But I just want to commend your last statement. And we could go back and forth on this all night, but it's like close to 9:30. So since it was an enclosure, I would like to make a motion to adjourn if I'm allowed. Dina, I'm sorry, Dina, you do the motion.
The topic is still on the table and not every board member has spoken, and we actually have other business to attend to as well. Dina?
Yes, I just wanted to say one little thing, and then yes, Aaron, because you have a meeting tomorrow and the day after. So yes, the Raider word does not have anything to do with one culture or the other, but we made it to have something to do with one culture or the other. The word railer has nothing to do with sexual context, but it has been made to be in a sexual context. The word chicks can be a word that represents little chickens, but it can also have a connotation of sexual misrepresentation, because we created context around it. In our town, the word raider in its evolution, if we look back in history, has created a context in which it existed. And then we kind of made it look a little bit different, we kind of evolved it. But the context is what has been presented to us as the problem initially, not the word raider as it is the warrior of somebody else's context. The context of the raiders as they have been presenting in the Rutland City and representing a public school as an organization. Now, to me, it doesn't really matter what somebody does personally. If they want to be a raider, they want to have anything that somebody wants to have in their personal life, they should. This is looking at the manifestation of our school, our mission, and as a representation of our district going forward. So the word raider is not a problem as a word. It's a problem as it was created historically in the context of representing the Native American in a certain way. That's all it is. So the request and using people as that representation. So if you look at Native, and I'm not an expert, but Native American culture as itself does not take ownership over their animal type of symbols. So that's part of actually their practice. So things that are represented in Native American culture as animal symbols are not owned by that culture, and they're not kind of looking at it as the same as if you take their representation of them as people and put that on things and add names to it, and now you have a context. So I just wanted to say that, and I agree with Aaron that, we're tired, but there's more to do.
All right, I have Charlene and then Anne.
I guess I'll just make my little comment as well. I'm not going to take up a lot of time. I know there's a disconnect here a little bit between, I guess, the word raider and the logo. And I wanted to just say, we did talk about keeping the raider name and getting rid of the logo. There was a time many years ago, I would agree, yes, that we had an Indian involved, and we got rid of some of those things. And in the current several years, between now and the last, I don't know how many years, there has been less of a connotation with an Indian with the word raider. When most people, I'm going to speak for most people here, I guess, when they say raider, they're not thinking about an Indian or thinking of any along those lines. So I think people are feeling that's not how they feel about the word. And I guess they're being told that that's what you're saying when you're saying that word. So, and they're feeling maybe offended as well because they feel like they're being called, bad people and being racist and things like that, which is not, it's furthest from the truth. So I just kind of wanted to put that out there. I'm sure you all have heard this, but I'm still feeling like the word raider is not, in my mind, and I could be wrong, but I'm just speaking for a lot of people, that the word raider, it's not synonymous with an Indian in most people's minds currently in the Rutland community. It's a different meaning, and I'm sure there's lots of you here. I understand there's lots of points of view here, so I just thought I'd put that out there.
Anne?
Thank you. I'm having trouble hearing with the buzz.
I can hear you.
Okay. I wanted to say Caleb, Catherine, Jack, Mr. Schillinger, and also I know there's some students that were on this committee listening in on the meeting. I commend you. I thank you for your clear-headedness through this process. I hope you're proud of yourselves. It's a difficult decision. I know that you guys had some tough conversations. You spent a lot of time. Difficult decision among a lot of contentious adults. I appreciate you guys, and I thank you very much.
Okay. Anyone else from the board? Joanne? And then Kathy?
I'd like to make a motion to accept the new mascot name the Ravens as presented by the students and Principal Schillinger this evening.
Okay, and do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. Not sure who beat the gun on that. Was that you, Ann?
Roll call vote, please.
Okay. So the motion on the floor is to accept the new mascot as the Ravens. And any other discussion? I know maybe only one board member hasn't spoken. I think everyone's already made their point. So would anyone that has not spoken like to add anything?
I would just like to also thank the committee for doing such hard work in such a contentious atmosphere. I know it couldn't have been easy, and you all probably had a lot of people coming at you from different directions. So I just want to say thank you, and that I support your recommendation.
Caleb?
I just wanted to have one other thing for you guys to think about as you vote on this. A lot of you said that the negative connotations from a mascot came from what you made of it, and I believe a lot of the negative connotations of the Raider mascot probably came from the Arrowhead logo paired with it. So I just wanted to remind you that when you later on choose the logo, make sure the logo doesn't give the connotations of like death or whatever your issues with it were. Pick a raven holding a like living tree branch or something that's a symbol of life in Christianity, I believe. I just think that a lot of the negative connotations can be kind of gotten rid of at a later date with the next proceedings. So that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you, Caleb. And just to give the opportunity, I don't know if Catherine or Jack would like to say anything to the board. Catherine?
I'll be brief, but I just want to say it's more to the public and the board, I guess, that with our suggestions, everything we did was from other people. We just did the work, the suggestions, the voting, all that. We did the work that nobody else had to, so that we could come to this conclusion, whether it's accepted or not. All the suggestions were from the public. That was all that I needed to say.
Great, thank you. Erin?
I'd like to make a motion to table Joanne's motion, however we do that, because I really think we need more information. The PowerPoint and the presentation is great for the public, but as a board, a collective, we need all the documentation supporting this. So I would like to make a motion to table Joanne's previous motion regarding accepting this recommendation at this time.
So the motion on the floor has precedence, and that's Joanne's motion. And we can vote on that motion, and then then you could make your motion. So the motion
We have
on the
to
floor.
like retract the motion.
Good.
No.
She could if we amended it.
Good. Could I ask about that question, Allison?
Matt, go ahead.
Is it okay? Oh, can Joanne retract her motion so that people could vote on Erin's motion if they want to first, to table it till a later time? I don't know if that's a possible thing that can be done.
I'm looking this up, so give me a second.
You can actually make a motion to table anything at any time. Period.
Once there's a motion already on the floor.
Yes, yes, because that's the point of tabling it.
Okay, the motion to take from the table. Well, no.
No, that's different.
If there's a motion that's on the floor, it can be tabled if there's a second. So Allison, as your chair, you need to hold for a second.
No, the motion that is made has the precedence.
Does the motion
already on the
have
floor.
priority or no?
No, the motion on the floor has priority.
Table. Let's look.
No, it requires a second. It cannot be debated.
I'll second her tabling.
Thank you, Harley. About this.
So it takes some, did you,
I thought the motion to table took priority.
It does.
I am the clerk. Can you guys please listen to me? It takes a second, so someone can make a second, and then we can vote to table. That's the rule. So, so I'm going to step back now, and Allison, if you could proceed with that. We have to ask for a second, and then we.
And I'll second the motion to table.
Okay. So the motion to table discussion has been made and seconded, and we will do a roll call vote. So Brittany?
Yes.
Hurley?
Yes.
Anne?
No.
Dina?
No.
Kevin?
No.
Matt?
No.
Joanne? I'm sorry, Joanne, I couldn't hear you.
No.
No. Charlene?
Yes.
Aaron?
Yes.
Kathy?
No.
So the motion fails. There were 4 yes to table it and 6 no. So we are back to the original motion as the motion was not tabled. So any further discussion? Okay, so the motion on the floor is to accept the Raven as the new mascot and moniker for Rutland, well, I guess really RHS, Rutland City Public Schools. And so we will do a roll call vote. And so Brittany?
No.
Hurley?
No.
Anne?
Yes.
Dina?
Yes.
Kevin?
Yes.
Matt?
Yes.
Joanne?
Yes.
Charlene?
No.
Aaron?
No.
Kathy?
Yes.
Okay, so the motion carries 6 yes and 4 no for the Raven to be the new mascot. Okay, thank you, everyone. Oh, I don't know. Okay, so the last thing on our agenda is we have an executive session. So Joanne, do you have the wording to go into executive session regarding negotiations?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to go into executive session to discuss contract negotiations and also a contract renewal, the premature disclosure of which would put the school board at a disadvantage. And I invite Bill Olson, Ted Clemenos, Robert Bliss, and is there anyone else that I'm missing?
Have you sent an email for that, Joanne?
That's what I was going to ask.
Oh, no, I haven't. I'm going to send it right now. I'm sorry, my brain isn't working. I'll send it right now. Okay, so I just made that motion, second and vote, and I'll send the email right now.
Okay,
Good,
so
that's,
is there a second for executive session? Kevin, thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, motion passes unanimously, and we'll see you all in the other meeting.